because we're at the tail end of the federal government making grant opportunities available. We've actually had no new grant opportunities in this last month, and we've had no new decisions on any pending grants. Councilman Rosendahl asked for, and we provided to him a list of the pending grants that we've made that we haven't heard on. We have 10 applications for a total of $219 million worth of funding if all of those were approved, including the one you're going to hear about today with LA RICS, which is for $172 million. And I think while we haven't had a decision on it and we're keeping our fingers crossed, it looks like there may be some good news coming forward on that grant. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that the CAO's office will be hosting a training opportunity on ARA grants management and compliance training. This is to prepare for all the auditors that come in and look at all of our grant opportunities.
Is it internal for departments?
It is internal for departments, and we'd like to also extend an invitation to the members of this committee for your staff and also any of the council staff, not just to find out about what's going on with ARA and to prepare for these grants. That's going to be on September 1st from 8:30 to 11:30 in the morning, and it'll be in the CAO's suite of offices in one of the conference rooms.
Any of the community partners that are going to be spending stuff out, should they be involved, or is this more just internal?
This is more directed for the departments internally.
Okay, good.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy Sosa with the CEO's office.
Let me just renew my weekly request on two issues: mass notification and green cabs.
Yes, sir.
If you can keep looking for grants in those two areas.
I have.
Yeah.
I'll have a report back for you at the next one of these on both of those.
My update's very short today. As Jim said, there have been no recent awards, denials, or new applications submitted since our last meeting, but I would like to highlight a few recent changes to the dashboard. The total dollars awarded in the transportation infrastructure category has been decreased by $223,966 to reflect the recent partial deobligation of funds for the bike safe grading replacement project, part of the Transportation Enhancements Activities Fund. The deobligation is a result of lower contract construction costs at time of award. The new award amount for the project is $524,780. We also have received updated information on job creation and retention expenditures and reimbursements for the month ending June 30th. Just over 900 jobs were created and retained with Recovery Act funds during the month of June. This consists of 514 jobs in the private sector and 423 jobs in the city and public sector. Cumulative expenditures through June 30th have increased by $11.4 million to $82.7 million, and total reimbursements through June 30th have increased by $8.9 million to $64.7 million. So right now we're at approximately 14% of our total funds awarded being spent.
14, you said?
About 14%. That's through June.
Okay.
And that's all I have for you this morning.
And I think it was a while ago, I'm looking at the report back, the kind of city-by-city comparison in terms of just so we can see is everybody roughly at that same percentage or not. Were we able to find any stats on, are the cities roughly at 14% is the overwhelming majority?
We have not looked at that since earlier this year when we did it, I think, in the springtime.
Right.
But that's something that we can look at and see if we're about the same as other cities.
Thank you. If you were to, be asked just and I know I've asked this before you, or asked this of you before, your average person watching right now, looking at the stimulus dollars, what's the timeline, do we think, for when the stimulus will mostly hit Los Angeles? Do we have kind of can we put that out there in a document that roughly we think, DWP stuff will be spent out in the next 18 months, that I think a lot of people want to see that there's some clarity of at least what our role is in spending out money and whether we have expectations of how quickly that's going to go out there.
Well, yes, sir. The obligations under ARA is that for most of these programs, the funds have to be spent by September 30th of 2012. Right. So we have that short time frame to be able to spend most of the money. And in some of these programs, they even required us to obligate 50% of the funds within the first year and 50% within the second year on that, too. And as you know, on some of the weatherization programs and EDCBG and whatever, they've established some guidelines as to when they want to do that to accelerate. So I would say even though we're only at 14%, I think you're going to see a large amount of spending that's going to be going on, because most of the contracts now are either have been let or being let, and we'll start seeing that spending. But I make the point again that most of the recovery, 2/3 of all the funding that's coming into Los Angeles to aid in the recovery is not money that's coming through the city through these grants. It's coming through the tax benefits and entitlements that people are getting, and that's been going on. Just to give you an example, on the federal government level, as far as their reimbursement for our types of programs, they've reimbursed about 48% of the funds. So I assume most of that is money that's actually gone to states, where the states have then requested that money and are passing it on. But in the tax benefits and the entitlements, the federal spending is in the upward 68% to 70% level. So clearly that money's getting out a lot faster than the money that for the kinds of programs that we're doing.
Yeah, okay. All righty. Let's go to 1A, please. Oh, I'm sorry, did anybody have any other questions? Okay. Good morning.
Good morning, council members. I'm Felipe Perez. I'm the mayor's office liaison to the LA RICS Joint Powers Authority.
And this is your bodyguard?
Security is one of my duties.
This is my colleague.
Deputy Randy Bunt,
morning.
LA Sheriff, part of the LA RICS team.
Great. Good to have you here.
Thank you. We were asked to represent the JPA. Deputy Chief Scott Poster, who's the acting executive director, is in Washington, D.C. right now, working with the FCC to keep the project moving forward. So we're here to just give you a brief update and description of this project that we proposed. In mid-May of this year, LA RICS received a waiver from the FCC to use a part of the 700 megahertz spectrum. It's additional airways being freed up by the FCC for public safety use. Because LA RICS received the use of that spectrum, LA RICS became eligible to apply in a late round of funding under the Broadband Technology Opportunities Program to be able to seek funding to build a network to utilize that additional spectrum. What LA RICS did, LA RICS is the eligible applicant, put together a $245 million proposal to build a public safety broadband network serving all of the LA RICS area, which encompasses all of Los Angeles County and includes agencies such as the LAPD, LAFD, the Sheriff's Department, LA County Fire Department, really every public safety agency in Los Angeles County. The project proposal overall, including the grant request and the in-kind contribution, totals $245 million. The grant request itself was $172 million, the balance being made up of in-kind contributions and cash contributions from LA RICS members.
Can you break down those in-kind and cash? I mean, is this stuff that's already in general fund? Is it from other grant funds that we have? What's the impact on our general fund?
The bulk of the in-kind contributions was existing public safety sites that are going to be used to actually site the transmitter receiver equipment for the network. So the sites, so literally putting an antenna on a police station was part of the in-kind contribution. The other big portion of the in-kind was use of the region's microwave network, government-owned microwave network, government-owned fiber network. That made up about $43 million of the in-kind contribution. The remaining balance, approximately $30 million of in-kind, was offered up by the County of Los Angeles.
So there's no cash from county or city general fund?
No cash from the city general fund. There will be cash from the county general fund.
Thank you, county. All right.
And essentially, in short, what the proposal is to build a 290-site broadband wireless network for public safety use. This 290-site network is going to cover nearly 90% of the county's geography, that 10% balance being in these hard-to-reach mountainous areas. All of the densely populated basin will be covered by this system, and the system will have the capacity definitely to let public safety users run applications on that network. And as we build the network and sort of test it and run it through its paces, we may be able to put additional government employees on that network. So it really represents a great opportunity for LA-RICS and a great complement to the voice system, which is the core of the LA-RICS concept.
Is emergency operations included as part of this, or is that the future stuff you talk about?
Emergency operations is part of that public safety core.
Okay. Alrighty. Good. Anything you'd like to add on the county side?
Just that this grant will be able to accentuate our infrastructure. There's a lot of technology out there that helps us as end users. LAFD, LA City. LA City has a thumbprint recognition system. LASD has one. We like to, in containment situations, it's just one example of many. We like to be able to, if we have a known suspect, get the information out to the end user as fast as possible. What normally happens is you have somebody run to the station, get photocopies of the picture of the wanted suspect, and then run it out to containment. We want to be able to press a button and send that person's picture, his last, photo that we have, send it out to each individual unit. That all takes bandwidth. The current infrastructure, both LA City and all the other associated agencies, County Fire, it's not strong enough as technology keeps getting added, license plate recognition system, GPS, it takes up a lot of bandwidth. This will complement all of that so much, it would actually make the end user's job much more safer and help us help the public at large.
Okay. So, thank you. And the job estimates, the 2,200 jobs or so, the private sector, are those just a couple months of installation work? Is that a year-long estimate? That seems to be, it's great. It would certainly multiply by a high factor the total number of jobs we've gotten from the stimulus funding thus far. But can you break down where that calculation comes from?
That job estimate number was based on a White House Council of Economic Advisors figure that essentially you divide the overall cost of the project by, I believe it's $80,000, and that gives you a rough estimate of the job years provided here. So the calculation presented is 2,200 job years. And as we broke that down, there'd be 292 direct job years in the actual construction of the system, 1,100 indirect job years, essentially in the manufacturing of the equipment that will be used to build the system, and 789 induced job years, just the multiplier effect of pumping money into the economy. And so that's where that calculation came from, Councilman.
Okay. Other questions, colleagues? Mr. Parks?
Yeah, let me just ask a couple of things, because it's been a while since we've dealt with this. But as we go forward, the infrastructure is going to be built. But now, is there any guidelines, because at some point the infrastructure is going to have to be upgraded and things of that nature, how those costs are divided, or how does that work?
That question right now is a charge of the LA-RICS JPA Finance Committee to sort out, number one, the capital expense of the build-out of the system and that maintenance and operation expense going forward. So that question is under consideration by the JPA right now.
Okay. But the issue of these funds are basically to become operational, and then the JPA will decide at some point how to maintain and then upgrade and keep it functional for eternity.
That's correct, Councilman.
Right. The other thing is that, and then I just want to make sure, we've said this a million times in ITGA as it's going through, is that we just not leave any public safety agency out of this. Sometimes it's taken a flavor that the fire department was pushing it, and then you had these kind of back and forth. We want to make sure that the harbor and DWP security, all those functions have not been left out of this discussion.
Not at all, Councilman. One of the great things about this network that we may have the opportunity to build is As Deputy Bunt said, it's the pipeline. It's the infrastructure, it's the network on which communication can flow, and we will invite all these public safety agencies to use that network as their agency in the city and the region needs to do so.
And I agree, it's probably one of the best innovations since they invented the radio, and so that's why we want to make sure that we not spend X number of hundreds of millions and then all of a sudden look up and somebody interest has been left out. And the other issue, when we talked about it before, and I forget now whether, does this network is inclusive of having trunking of the lines, or are they more standardized as, because one of the things that in years past, there was always a discussion about trunking gets you a delay, and particularly if you're into emergency situation, whether you get that direct line-to-line access.
This data network, Councilman, is complementary to but distinct from the voice system. The voice system is where that trunking conversation is happening. This data system is not involved in the trunking.
So every department's current voice system plugs into this, but it's maintained separately from the larger issue of the data.
It's kind of similar in your cell phone text messaging versus your phone call.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, sir. It's kind of similar to, in layman's terms, your cell phone, your phone call versus your text messaging. This would be the text messaging. It's data.
And are we still running about 70-80% data as opposed to voice? Is that still running in that?
And it's increasing. Again, back to the infrastructure. I mean, you can ask any officer who's done, any deputy. You run John Smith on a Friday night. It's such a common name. You don't have any other way to identify that person, and you'll get a million billion hits. Well, then you'll actually freeze up some of the computer systems that we have out there. Now, that's bandwidth. That's because we don't have enough room for the data to come in. This helps accentuate and be able to expand that we can still have some of the other tools that take up some of this bandwidth, but still allow us all to be able to do our regular daily functions no matter how busy it gets.
And Councilman, we would build this network on new spectrum, on new airwaves, so we wouldn't have to take away from any of the existing voice channels.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Alcorn, any questions? Nope. All right. Okay. Thank you for the update. Appreciate it very much. Appreciate you being here. Let's go to item number 2. Weatherization.
Good morning, Council members. Gretchen Hardison, LA Department of Water and Power.
Nelson Liu, Department of
Will you move that microphone a little bit closer so we can hear you? Thank you.
Nelson Liu, Department of Water and Power.
Thank you.
This item before you is a follow-up to an item that you heard in the month of May to authorize the Department of Water and Power to take over the implementation of the Low-Income Weatherization Assistance Program in the majority of the City of Los Angeles area. The item was approved by this committee and full council in May and went on to the LADWP Board of Commissioners where it was approved in June. And I believe we were asked to come back and confirm with you when that agreement was finalized with the State Community Services and Development Department. That contract has been signed and all the agreements are in place. The contract term is now for July 1st, 2010 through March of 2012. So we have just a very brief status report for you here, and Nelson is available if you have any questions on specifics.
Okay. Just reading through the status report. So we have the database. We've started outreach. Or we're just preparing the outreach still?
No, we're still preparing documentation and all the intake information that we're going to send out, but that's all being prepared right now as we speak.
What's your target date for sending out materials and beginning the outreach?
Probably within about 3 weeks we would have that material out.
Okay. All right. And I'm familiar with this because we've had it a couple times, but either member?
No.
Mr. Alcorn? Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll go ahead then and adopt the report. We'll move that forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next item, please.
Good morning. This too is a report back on a Department of Water and Power grant program that you heard just 4 weeks ago in this committee that moved on to full city council to approve the ordinance to allow payment to all of the project partners. And at that time, we were asked to provide a little more information on the project budget, and that is before you today. Have Marcelo Di Paolo available to answer any questions on that.
All right. Well, why don't I dive in? Can you, just one particular piece, can you walk me through what the demo grants for both the fleet EV and fleet EV infrastructure and then the electric vehicle fleet, there's two different parts in that budget hierarchy, are going to be spent on? I think it's the 2.7, the third box in from the left on the budget hierarchy, and then 4 over the 8.4 and the 11.4. How's that going to be spent for the EVs?
Okay, that money right there is basically going to be dedicated for infrastructure improvements, installation of EV chargers throughout the city of LA. It's going to be used for also research and development that's going to be done on the grid to see what the impact of EVs will be. It'll also be done to procure some vehicles so that we can actually see how they work, see how we can actually use this technology for, the idea of a car being a mobile battery, for instance. Things like that in technology, we're going to be doing testing and evaluating it. And
That's the first piece, that 2.7?
that's going to be for the two boxes under EV. Basically, there are two budgets that we have identified it from. One was a power budget, one was a joint system budget. So through DWP's own budget, we identified two pockets where we were going to get it. And basically, the money is going to be used for both equipment and for labor. And
Oh, so the 2.7 is to buy the vehicles?
yeah.
Is that, I know there was a promise made to BYD of purchasing a certain number of their vehicles. I know they're not yet crash tested or available for purchase here in the United States. Is that 2.7 funding some of that? I think it was a promise of 300 fleet vehicles we were going to buy from BYD, the Chinese electric car manufacturer that's setting up here?
I'm not sure what percentage that might be. Maybe part of this fund may be used. Right now, we're in this project. We're in our project definition planning phase. We're going to start entering design phase in the next month or so. And once we start going into design, we're going to identify specifics on which manufacturers. And if there are existing programs that we can actually supplement with this grant, we will try and do. But the actual determination of whether it'll be a Chevy or a Toyota or a BYD vehicle, that has not been done yet.
The reason I bring it up, there's a company that's based here in Santa Monica, Coda, which was kind of a little bit ahead of even BYD in terms of the crash testing and stuff like that, and they're interested in locating their headquarters here for assembly as well. It's going to be an American assembled car because over 50% of the components. So we're competing potentially with Carson, Long Beach, a couple other places. We'd love to land them here. But even if they're not in the city of Los Angeles, I think they're going to be the first next generation besides the Nissan Leaf, which is going to be pretty much exclusively made outside of the U.S. And just thinking of local jobs, it's going to be a similar price point if we can make sure that we're looking at those as well, because I think they're really targeting fleet vehicles, so it could. And it's the same charging infrastructure for all of these vehicles right now. That would be great if we can make sure that we're including them too.
Definitely.
And then the other piece is the infrastructure, and the 8.4 is to evaluate.
The infrastructure, we're going to be installing chargers. There's going to be some 500, 600, 700 chargers that will go throughout the city of LA. And
those are both in city buildings as well as some of the public locations that we have them in now?
Exactly.
Has there been any, sorry to drill so deep in this, and we can maybe do it offline a little bit, but is there any discussion of the existing 240 or 220 volt systems that we have throughout the city with the old paddle chargers, whether we're going to use some of those same locations and just switch the charging infrastructure out?
Yes, our fleet infrastructure group as well as us, we're working together to find all the locations, including those. And right now what we're doing is there's multiple grants that are in. There's some that they're getting from the state, the city, like the Ecotality one and various other ones. Mm-hmm. Whatever chargers that they don't get, we're looking at picking up the ones that they don't finish as part of this grant.
Okay. All right, I think we've walked through the other pieces of it before, so I just wanted to know about the EV stuff. Any other questions? No? Okay. All righty. Well, we'll follow up, and thank you for that. We'll go ahead and adopt the report and move that forward.
Thank you
Thanks for
very
your good work on this. Item 4, please.
Good morning. Helena Sanchez, Office of the CAO.
Good morning.
So, this is a request to provide resolution authority positions for the Community Development Department to administer the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. The report includes funding adjustments to programs and appropriations necessary to fund CDD and appropriations for the General Services and Housing Departments not included in the report approved by Council on June 2nd. Also, we'd like to make an amendment to our report by modifying Recommendation 2A to read, establish a new fund entitled ARA, EECBG Fund, Mayor, CAO, Public Works, for the purpose of receipt, retention, expending, and reporting of EECBG oversight, Regional Climate Action Plan, Municipal Buildings Retrofit Program, Street Lighting Component, and related. Authorize the General Manager of the Community Development Department or his or her designee to administer the fund, and a copy of this was already provided to the clerk.
And with the fund number as well? Are we still with the fund number? Or are
Sorry?
With the fund number as well? The draft I have just has fund XXX.
It would need to, the Controller's Office, when they created the fund,
Okay.
would provide the number. The CAO report recommends to reduce the appropriation of each program by approximately 4.0% and transfer the appropriation to the Community Development Department. Additionally, it's recommended that 0.5% of the grant be appropriated to the Office of the Administrative Officer to fund oversight, coordination, and reporting activities for the grant in accordance with Council File 090367. This would result in an overall reduction to department appropriations of 4.56%, or $1,685,000. And these are included in Attachment 1. We thought that the solution was equitable in that all departments will contribute and will benefit from CDD's administration of the grant. The U.S. Department of Energy guidelines allow up to 10% of total grant funds to be used towards administration of the grant. Approximately 5.5% of the remaining appropriations are eligible to use toward department administration of grant funds. There's also an...
But we don't plan to do that right now, as of now?
Forgive me?
But we don't plan to do that as of now? We think it'll just be 4.5% of that 10 that's eligible?
It would be 4.5% that was transferred to CDD. If there's any incremental administration to be done by the departments, we're just stating that there's sufficient funding, allowable funding provided.
But if it doesn't creep up in those administrative costs, we do expect to use the balance of that for the program itself?
Yes. Also, there's a...
And is there any check on that? I mean, just for those who are monitoring the oversight, what protections or check-in do we have if suddenly somebody says, oh, I need to take 8% of this for oversight or 9% of it? Does that come back to us? Does there need to be a justification? Do we have any expectation?
Part of the role of CDD in this process is to determine that charges are allowable according to the grant guidelines.
Well, I wouldn't put the city council necessarily, I mean, you can't oversee yourself.
Oh.
So if they're overseeing, what's allowable, and they say, well, we need more, and we decide it's allowable, that's CDD overseeing CDD to have more money, which I would understand. But what sort of check do we have on that?
Rhonda Gaston with the Community Development Department. CDD would bring forward the transmittal to council if, in fact, we would need additional dollars for administration.
But right now, you feel pretty confident that this pegs
Yes,
it?
the amount that's shown in the CAO report is sufficient for CDD at this time.
Okay. All right.
There's an alternative plan for funding that was also provided as attachment 2. If the committee and council doesn't agree to making an equal amount from each department.
No, I think it's much easier to do.
Councilman Ramel Pascual, the Mayor's Office. The attachment 2 is a submittal from our office, and the logic around this particular submittal was that we wanted to preserve those the funding sources that went directly out to communities. We felt that there were certain programs that would feel less of a hit if we were to take more from that particular program and preserve the community grants program, the workforce programs, more preservation on the municipal retrofit program. So the logic was really to make sure that those resources that went directly out to communities were preserved more than those that had larger chunks of money, particularly ones that went to LAHD with the $5.4 million, so we thought it would be less of a hit if we took more out of that, as well as ports, given that there's also potentially other forms of other resources. So that's the logic. And
So these would be primarily administrative funds that otherwise, we have running balances on, that you thought might be able to actually put more out there on the street?
On the street, for the preservation of, say, the grants programs to the communities for both outreach and retrofit, we wanted to preserve the total amount that we gave out, because it's already a small amount.
I got you, okay. And CO is not recommending one way or the other, it's just, these are two options, it's a policy decision, or?
The CO would not be opposed toward the mayor's option if...
Right. Okay, well, as explained, colleagues, I think it might be smarter to take these balances from other places, keep more of the balance to actually go towards the programs, as long as it's not such a cumbersome and difficult process that we can make sure the oversight is there. But if you feel confident, then I would move the attachment to way of doing this in order to have more out there from the grants. Mr. Parks?
Yes, on this issue is tied directly to what the council just approved and is waiting for a report back. So is this premature, or should this come hand in hand when the response comes back on the grants?
No, I think
on the bonding.
The QECD bonds is what, this would have very minimal effect on the total amount that would be going into a QECD funding source, given that if you look at attachment 2, the resources that will be taken out is a little bit over $140,000. And so the QECB funding was $7 million would go to QECB, and then we would have another $7 million to do our retrofit program. So this would have very...
What I was wondering is that, depending on whether the $39 million is approved or not approved, is this like option 2? Because what I understood, we're leveraging the $14 million to use with the $39 million as far as the debt service.
Yes, and
So will this get altered if the bonds are approved, or versus if the bonds are not approved?
No, it would, if the bonds were not approved, we will still have the $14 million to spend on retrofit.
So then it'd be just smaller number of buildings?
It'll be $142,000 less to spend on...
No, but if from the bonds to no bonds...
Oh, yeah, no, it wouldn't affect...
Smaller number of buildings...
No, it's two separate, it's two separate pots.
So the issue is using this money, and we went with the bonds, we still have the $14 million to leverage.
If the bonds were not approved, yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay, we'll move that referred over to personnel as well, just for the personnel issues, and we'll get that scheduled. Mr. Zion's back next week, I believe. We'll make sure it moves swiftly or gets waived out if those questions can be answered. Okay?
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Do you have any general public comment on the meeting? Nope. All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.